Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc. He's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Sean Thompson. And this is the Sean Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
Money, 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 money.
And when the band plays,
very, very interesting what has happened to our economy since a bust out from Chicago who was late on his Chrysler 300, known as a ghetto Bentley, was sent to Washington. $30 trillion in debt since Barack Obama was elected. In just 4 years, the dimwit in diapers, as I refer to him, some pretended he was president and got 81 million votes. They're not good at math. $9 trillion in 4 years. The fastest amount of debt accumulated in history. So how do you fix it? You got to thread a needle, boy. Whew. You got to grow and you got to slow the spending. My next guest spent years, decades even, paying attention to this for the Wall Street Journal, for Forbes, for so many outlets, writing specifically about import, export, trade, and American economy. Kenneth Rapoza, now at the Prosperous America. How are you?
Hey, Sean. Thanks for having me on. Doing well.
Well, this is a very interesting time and a very interesting topic, and it's a hybrid austerity as I see it. But the numbers don't lie. Only politicians do in Brooks Brothers suits. So what do the numbers tell us, you handsome devil?
Well, if the numbers you're talking about are last month's trade numbers, which were released by the Bureau of Economic Analysis on August 4th, we're seeing that the trade deficit, which is something Trump always talks about, has declined about $200 billion compared to the same period last year, ending in June. So from January to June 2025 versus today, we're have a smaller deficit than we did then.
When's the last time that happened? Has it happened?
The only time I can think off the top of my head when that happened would probably be in 2020. COVID year, maybe, compared to 2019, and then it quickly changed because, of course, everyone was home and they were getting their stimulus checks and they were buying exercise bikes and all that other stuff. So then the deficit then at the end of the year, by that point, you surpassed $1 trillion goods deficit, right? So, and we've been there for years ever since. So once COVID kicked in, you finally cracked through $1 trillion goods deficit. You've been there ever since, and if we can maintain the average monthly deficit in the United States, which is around 82 to $85 billion in goods, right? Deficit per month. That's pretty much what we generate. If you stay there, then you'll be below $1 trillion deficit by year's end. And then for Trump, I think that will allow him at least to declare a victory lap on his trade policy, right? Some people say, well, the economy slowed, and so that's the reason. But I don't know. I don't know if we're seeing an indication of the economy slowing. I mean, I haven't seen seen any indications of a recession. That's for sure. No one's talking about a recession, so that would be a victory lap for him, at least in that regard. There's a few other things that aren't working out so well. Of course, as you know, Sean, we're giving out over $100 billion in tariff refunds to the likes of Walmart and Nike, and which basically is a Chinese company at this point. They should just list in the Shanghai Stock Exchange. We're dishing out all the money to these guys now, and that was money that the big beautiful bill said would be used to pay for these tax cuts, right?
Yes.
So that's problem. Fiscal deficit rises to over $2 trillion easily.
But that's an adjudicated issue. That's not an issue that was planned, right? This is something that judges in robes decided was going to happen more so than what the policy was laid out to be at the time of its passing. So it's interesting, right? Because the one downside is the result of judges, most of whom don't have calluses on their hands and couldn't do a push-up, but the point is well taken. The other thing I think that's happening that's interesting, right? 11 states, the boom belt, the new boom belt, 74% of the economy. So it could be also that simultaneously with this, we're reshoring some of the goods and services and manufacturing and needs to eliminate that dependency on import-export, which necessarily isn't a bad thing because you and I both know I give you this dirty paper, you give me something I feel is of value. It's a win inside of a win. But if he can thread that needle, bring back onshore, redevelop American manufacturing, American products, have people buying more American, it would be, in essence, a hybrid austerity, especially when you couple the massive explosion of energy production back in our country that was stifled and hamstringed because of policies offshoring it, right?
Well, look, I could tell you this, that for sure reshoring is happening. I don't always like using the word reshoring, even though we at Coalition for a Prosperous America definitely like that word. And the reason why I don't always use it is because a lot of times it's just companies, they already had the capacity to make 100 widgets, but because of imports, probably from Mexico, let's say, or Asia, they were only making 70 widgets. So now they're going to make the 100 widgets that they have the capacity to make. They're going to hire more people. That's going to, they might invest in a new machine to make more widgets, but they've already had that facility there all ready to go. But what we're seeing more of, especially in certain sectors like pharma in particular, is we're seeing some greenfield projects happen. We're seeing things like steel is being expanded. Again, that might be, in some cases, just expanding what was already there, fixing it up, getting it jump-started again. Even though there are friends in South Korea, Hyundai, they are building a steel mill, I think in Alabama. They announced that in Trump's first year. So, there are you can say that's a form of reshoring, right? That was never here before. Of course, that could have been imported from certain types of steel they're going to produce. It could have been imported from Korea. But, instead they're going to make that in the South for probably Hyundais and Kias, that are made in Georgia, for example. All positive in that regard.
Caterpillar? Once they got out of Illinois, kicking ass. Caterpillar's kicking ass. When you look at some of the other things, even the foreign car manufacturers, that deal with both Mercedes and Volkswagen. What a perfect timing for their expansion here as the former administration hamstrung American cars to go into that EV nonsense that they couldn't sell without subsidizing. So it's really kind of interesting what's happening. And I'm seeing a realigning with Japan, which I personally like. I'm old enough to remember when Japan was the big threat. Oh, the Japan are buying at golf courses. They're going to own everything. And then all of a sudden it became China. China got very rich. Japan kind of sat on the sidelines. I like the reigniting of that relationship with Japan. They've been a true ally since, we kicked their ass. And after celebrating 81 years of dropping the bomb, it's much better in Hiroshima than it is in Detroit. So that's a good alliance, isn't it?
Absolutely. I often say this, and I think I've said this to you before, that Japan and South Korea are America's best allies. I mean, I would say a distant third would probably be Mexico. Of course, you got the drug problem in Mexico. It's a big problem. But when you look at Mexico compared to Canada, for example, Mexican leadership can always be counted on to go along with Washington. They might be a silent, they might be against certain things. So, certainly, Mexican leadership does not like tariffs that are going on for Mexican aluminum and steel and autos, for example. They definitely do not like that. But they will not be as divisive and as overtly against the administration, whether it's the Biden administration or the Trump administration, as the Canadians will be, right? The Canadians Mark Carney is constantly hopping on the Trump administration, constantly complaining about Trump. Either overtly or, in a roundabout way complaining about Trump. And that's not something you hear the Mexicans do. That's something you hear the Canadians do. It's something you hear the Europeans and our friends in the UK do. Japan and South Korea never do it. They're our best allies for sure. And hopefully, these are the countries that we're going to build into the future with. We see it with Hanwha Ocean and the Philly shipyard. You see it with, like I said, Hyundai and steel mills and in the South. This is a good direction for those countries in the U.S.
And Canada has got a tragic economic situation going on, both from the individual standpoint and the massive uptick in bankruptcies, and the country itself is flailing in a terrible economic syndrome. It doesn't get a lot of press here, though, does it?
Well, I didn't hear that last sentence. We'll say it again, Sean.
I said both the individual Canadian. The massive uptick of bankruptcies I think it's at record levels. It's even worse than the Great Recession. And the government of Canada, they're not economically strong whatsoever. When you look at the economic standpoint of Canada, it's extremely weak outside of a couple of different places, isn't it?
Absolutely. And when you look at the areas that have been faced with tariffs, let's look at steel and aluminum. Of course, Canada is a huge commodity play, right? It's a huge metals producer, right? Of course, oil and gas, mostly gas. But that sector of the economy, steel and aluminum, have been hurt, even though they can get more money for their items that they sell to the United States because the price of that commodity has risen, mostly because of the Iran war. They're selling less volume to the United States. Big volume has dropped to what they sell to the United States. They have the Canadian government has to chip in and help workers. They have to subsidize shipping of steel across the country to help steel companies avoid, to help steel companies have a lower overhead. So these are things that the government has to do in Canada to backstop some of the losses caused by, well, let's call it, trade friction between Washington and Ottawa.
Yeah, I'm
so they're in big trouble. I mean, they're going to come to Washington, I think, on Tuesday to discuss. Let's not forget, Trump promised 50% tariffs on Canada starting next week.
Yeah.
So whether or not that happens, I would say not. I would say that Canada makes the concessions that the Trump administration is asking for in order to avoid that. I would predict that happens on Tuesday or Wednesday. But if it doesn't, and Canada gets hit with 50% tariffs, I mean, I don't know. You would just be hearing guys like Fitch and S&P ratings say, we might have to downgrade these guys.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? I remember in the how many of those rating agencies were in Canada and got the great collapse of our economy wrong after grading all that debt for. So I've never liked those organizations because they've been working, in my opinion, to help fraud so much of our economy. But what else is very interesting to me is Murkowski and the hatred of Trump. And I don't think it has anything to do with anything other than the beneficiaries Alaska has been to the Biden administration and the green energy agenda, which now is ripped out. So we can now go, we don't even need Canada. We can go into Alaska. He's opened up millions of acres, which the Biden administration froze out. And Murkowski's got a problem on her hands because the new the lack of regulations to prevent companies from going into Alaska, it's over with. So they could take Alaska, what it is today, and quadruple it in the next 3 years, and that would really release us from any dependence on Canada. We don't need these people for anything, do we?
Wow. Yeah, I did not know all that about Alaska. Sean, you're telling me something. That's why I like being on the Sean Thompson Show, folks. I learn as I speak and at the same time. It's amazing.
Well,
so, yes, of course. I mean, look, if you have to be dependent, let's say, on someone, right, for natural resources, you want to be dependent on your friends. So Canada's next door. They're supposed to be our friends, even though with the Trump administration there's been some friction between the two. But Trump's going to be gone in 2 years, and we assume Canada's going to be our friends again.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be dependent on a country, right, for fuel, for sustenance, food, it's not bad, not horrible being dependent on a country like Canada, who's right next door, or Mexico, right next door. They're our neighbors. We got to get along with our neighbors, right? So that's not bad. But the fact that the United States can produce more of its own fuel in the United States, and whether or not they do that, because of course then Americans not going to want to produce too much. They don't want energy prices going to $30-$40 a barrel. So even if we can do all of that, they're going to be limited because they don't want oil prices to fall. But of course, the more we have here, the better. And of course, as you know, oil is always a reason to go on Middle East adventures. So if we don't have to worry about that, better. All Americans would support.
I'm very bullish for a simple reason. We are, and you're right, we're involved in this conflict with the Islamo-Nazis and this theocracy, but yet crude oil today is $81.16 a barrel. Now listen, I remember when Obama was in there, it was $111. When Biden was in there, it was $111. So oil fluctuates a tremendous amount, but mainly the reason it matters is because it wasn't until Trump that we became an exporter into the numbers we are. And if you look at how much of this regulation dictates the blend of our oil and all the nonsense, we're hamstringing ourselves. And what Trump does that shocks the world is he opens it all up. And I'm telling you, Kenneth, if you look at this Murkowski, you look at her father, Frank, his chief of staff went to jail for corruption with an oil company that has now been engulfed and defunct, but it was in scandals from Delaware. Right back to Joe Biden. I mean, it's amazing. Alaska's is as crooked as Chicago City Hall, and it has been forever because they know they got the precious commodity and they want to be paid for access to it. So it's fascinating what he's done. And I'll tell you another thing he's done that I think is getting no play. All of this talk of the Strait of Hormuz, I think it's been a head fake. I'm going to play this for you, and you tell me if I'm way off base because I'm too optimistic.
Breaking news. The United States and Iraq have announced more than $60 billion worth of business deals, with President Donald Trump declaring that the two countries will be doing a lot of deals because of Iraq's massive oil reserves. Several major American energy companies signed agreements during an event at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Chevron will help develop Iraqi oil fields and study a possible oil pipeline connecting Iraq and Syria. ConocoPhillips signed agreements to explore a major gas field and partner with BP on oil production. Meanwhile, HKN Energy secured a new contract to develop and produce oil in Iraq, while Halliburton also joined the growing list of energy partnerships.
You imagine if they pull a John Paul Getty, only this time it benefits America instead of John Paul Getty and Gavin Newsom's dad, and they start running the pipeline, and now there's no need to ship oil and energy through the Strait of Hormuz. Now you've got the Iran standing there holding the short bag, don't you?
Well, yes, that's been the plan, right? There already is a pipeline going from that cuts across Saudi Arabia. I forget the name of that pipeline. I want to call it the Red Line, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. So that's already been happening. That will improve flow away from the Strait of Hormuz, right? That's what.
Yeah, $60 billion to add 3 more. That's a lot.
That's a lot. Now, the only thing I say about whenever I hear Iraq and I hear Syria, I remember after the war, the original war on terrorism, we all thought that we were going to get all this windfall of Iraqi oil, and Iraq was going to be our friend, and we were going to be importing all this oil from Iraq because they're our buddies now, and we don't really import almost anything from Iraq, including crude oil. So I'm assuming that either a lot of that oil goes to Europe or maybe it goes to China. I mean, I really don't know. So by making that kind of a deal, what we're doing essentially is saying it's our guys, it's our companies that are rerouting it to Syria, and who knows how long we can trust Syria, honestly. Who knows how long those guys are going to be in power.
Oh, yeah, well, you got a terrorist.
Yes.
You got a terrorist.
Exactly. I couldn't even guess. But against what you're saying is our pieces on the chessboard are moving some of that oil away from China, right?
And it'll go to Europe.
There. It's not coming to us. Yeah, maybe, no. or you're profiting because it goes to Europe. Exactly. You're making the money off the Europeans.
You're making the money off the Europeans like you did with the LNG, right? We're already their end for the LNG. We've already handled that. You're neutering Iran. You're neutering Russia. And you've now become the supplier to Europe. And we don't need it because we've got our own right here. You forever drive the price of crude down. We're already a net exporter. You took the regulations off natural gas. He could really be lining things up for the most prosperous era to be after he's gone, as long as you don't get another moron in the White House. And you may not. You've got a deep bench when you go with Vance and DeSantis and Bessent and the rest of it. And when you listen to polls, recent polls, people do not trust, I don't care who you are, you do not trust these Democrats to deliver anything. Just look at the areas they are ruling over now. They're ghettos. So I think the best is yet to come. What do you think?
Well, I know I live in Massachusetts. I don't live in Boston. I live in another part. I live in the reddest part of Massachusetts. But I could tell you what our electric bills look like and how they keep going up. They went up 12% last August, and this August they went up another 11%. I don't have to worry about it. I have a different setup with the electric power grid over where I am. But this is what blue states are like. So they talk about the cost of living. We talked about this before and how cost of living under Trump is horrible. But of course, it's the blue states that have the highest cost of living, and it's because of taxes, and it's because of insurance, and it's because of other things that are related to the state that have nothing to do with the federal government, even if Biden was in charge.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you right now. I'm in the real estate business in South Florida, right? And I'm going to tell you right now what has happened is DeSantis and this administration opened up. It was Jeb Bush that screwed up the insurance. So DeSantis a year ago changes the insurance regulations. My insurance went down 30%. The only difference is what's going on in Illinois. It went up 30%. So I'm like Jerry Seinfeld. I'm even Steven. But when I look at my insurance, when I look at my energy, when I look at my water, in Florida, that's the most expensive thing is water, not electricity, and it's stable. But all the other essentials that come with real estate have gone down in Florida, up in Illinois. So really this is specifically a Democrat blue state cost, a tax on a tax. And when people start to realize they're making sales tax on the oil from the time it's pulled out of the ground to the time it's delivered into your car. The governments in these blue states are taxing that product 4 different times in Illinois. I don't know if it's the same in Massachusetts, but I would assume it is. And
well, we're called Massachusetts, so I'm guessing you're right.
They tax everybody from the refinery to the transportation company to the gas station to the consumer. You're taxing that one product at 4 different levels. So once you could explain it to the people, you've done this to yourself, and you want me to save you from yourself? Stop voting for them. It's that simple, isn't it?
It is. Well, Sean, the last time we spoke, you made a prediction, and you said that the midterms would belong to the Republicans. I'm wondering. I'm going to interview you now. I'm putting on my old journalist hat now. I'm going to turn the tables. Are you still thinking that?
100% where the elections have any legitimacy. Now, you and I both were watching that guy, I think it was on MSNBC, when they lost the 5 discs from Wisconsin, or the 5 drives from Wisconsin, and they had to say, we don't know who won, and then the scandal of that. The problem I have with betting on elections run by Democrats is I'm from Chicago. They've been stealing elections since Prohibition. So do I think it's going to stand a chance there? No, but I want you to hear this poll that was on CNN, which, by the way, I hear if you buy it, Kenneth, if you put a group together and you buy CNN, they give you $3 million. But here it is.
They don't care. They don't care. I mean, just look at these numbers. Okay, top issue, a midterm vote. You can list up the 3 issues. The economy, not surprisingly, comes in at number 1 at 54%. Immigration, 28%. Look where climate change is. It's tied for 14th. Tied for 14th, all the way down here at 3%. Johnny, I'm not the greatest mathematician in the world, but I sure as heck know that 54% is a whole heck of a lot higher than 3%.
So now you've got Illinois. 33 counties have voted for secession. 7 more are joining them in November. You've got Oregon. You've got Washington. You've got California. I'm double or nothing. I'll even let you go dessert. I'll bring 2 cigars. We go for dinner. I say Republican sweep where people can read. I'd like to put that caveat on
it. Deal. It's a deal.
All right. Very good. Kenneth Rapoza.
Like I said before, it's the one bet I hope I lose.
Kenneth Rapoza, I hope you lose it too, for all of our grandkids that are not yet born sake. Thank you for always making time for me. ProsperousAmerica.org, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, brother. You have a good night, and I can't wait. Medium rare. I'm even going to let you order for me. Medium rare. I want one of those double baked with everything, okay?
Sounds good.